Can you stand back here?
No. Yes.
I'm happy to. Are you?
I am. Couldn't you tell? I'll wait till Christelle and Mary get their pizza.
There you go.
Oh, there I am.
You can just say hello. They'll be good.
Okay, we're going to get started. Hello, everybody. For those of you on GoToMeeting, please mute. And when you're ready, send questions on the chat box and send them to organizer. All right. Hi, everybody. It is my pleasure to introduce you to one of my dearest colleagues and friends, Fernanda Liberali, who is from Sao Paulo, Brazil. She and I have been working together in varying ways for about 14 years. We are co-leaders in a movement and conference called Performing the World that meets every 2 years in New York City. And we've been back and forth working with each other a number of times. So she is a teacher, educator, researcher, and professor at the, I'm going to do it in Portuguese, Pontificia Católica Universidade de Sao Paulo, in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in the program of postgraduate studies in applied linguistics and language studies, and in the postgraduate program in education. She holds a degree in languages from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and a master's and doctorate in applied linguistics and language studies from PUC, which is the nickname of Pontificia Universidade. That's why I don't say it well, because I just say PUC. She is the co-founder and leader of a research group called Language Inactivity in the School Context. And she holds 2 postdoctoral degrees, which I didn't know till I read her little bio, in applied linguistics and language studies, from University of Helsinki and from Berlin Free Universität. And she has collaborations all over the world. She and I are both part of the of ISCAR, which is the International Sociocultural Research Group. So Fernanda's projects span the globe, and I will leave her to tell you more about her work. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with you all. I'm very happy and honored to have the opportunity to be talking to you about the work we do in Brazil. I would like to thank the University of Rutgers and Carrie especially for the invitation. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for me to learn from you, from your comments and the contributions you certainly give to our reflections about the projects we conduct in Brazil. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy from there as well. Okay, so here. Yes, so
there you go.
The presentation I created for today is an attempt to connect to you through some of the work and the theoretical background that I've been working in my research group. As Carrie said, whoops, let me right here first. So I tried to talk about how research can also connect to life outside the academic world and also to political issues that are so essential in our present world. In our reality in Brazil, it's a necessity to discuss what we mean by teacher education. We don't use training in Brazil, and it's very hard for me to use the word training because we in Brazil have a tradition of training connected to a behavioral situation. That's why it's educators' education, because for us, it's very meaningful to talk about teachers and not connect this to the idea of training. So that's why I'm using education there as well. So in our group, we are sorry. Oh no. Sorry. So we are a big group, as Carrie told you. We are from this applied linguistics at first, but now applied linguistics and education group of researchers who, from the beginning, we wanted to do a kind of research that was not just to interpret reality, but to transform reality. So in the early 90s, when Cecilia, the founder of our group, started, having her students there, and supervise research, she said she brought to the university something that in Brazil was considered very improper, that people would do research and transform the realities they were studying, not just study them and say what they were, but they would change themselves and change the realities while they were changing and researching. In the 90s in Brazil, this was, wow, it's not proper, it's not okay, we shouldn't do that. But she started doing this, and as students of her and as professionals, because we at PUC, we have to keep studying and working simultaneously. So our research was connected to what we did. So what we did had to change because we were changing through the things we were reading and the realities we were analyzing. And we wanted to discuss what we call then the critical collaborative research, which is an idea that when you enter any kind of field, you're going to change the field, and the field is going to change you. And this, it happens anyway, in our opinion, but we want to change this intentionally, together with people. And the subjects were not just passive subjects we were observing, but they were active people in this change. And these people, many of them, throughout the years, since the 90s, they changed from being a participant or a practitioner into being researchers together with us. Many of them joined the projects we had, and they took their master's degrees, their doctoral degrees, whatever, and they keep staying with us since then up to today without any payment or anything, or scholarship or anything, but just thinking that researching is a way of transforming realities. And so what I'm going to talk about today is how we organize this community of researchers as people who are involved with changing the world in a very Freudian framework. Because we are at the same university where Freud was, and this idea that the world, the way it is not a fair world, is very essential for us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this and the projects and how reading. Some people make jokes because we work in very difficult and very sad circumstances in some of the favelas. And at the same time, we talk about Spinoza, Vygotsky, and all this is all connected as one single thing. For Brazilians, many times, this is so improper, so, I don't know, impossible that we can do some kind of intervention in reality, and at the same time, we can keep publishing as the demands put to us. Because for us, publishing is a demand, and transforming is what is our desire in the world, our way of acting in the world. But we have to keep publishing so we can keep transforming the world. So we do both things. So we are a very productive group, although we do many other things as well. So what leads us? We are, our local context is a context of São Paulo mainly, but also some other states where I have students who initiated the project there. So we live here. Brazil is this very poor country with the red one means poor, and we are here in São Paulo, very, it's not a question of being poor, because then when you look at the way people live in certain parts of São Paulo, perhaps they are richer than many people here, but the difference is huge, and that's what makes things even more difficult. And we work with this huge difference in our project. We have kids who pay, I forgot to change it into dollars, but anyway, they pay a large amount of money per month for their tuition for school, while some of the kids, other kids, they have not even 1/3 of what they pay for school to live as a family, and they live in favelas. And we put all these kids together, and that's the project you're going to see, with very wealthy kids and very, very poor kids. And this difference can be seen in the picture you have of the city there. You have favelas and very important high-rise. In certain parts of São Paulo, you feel like you are in New York. In other parts, you feel like you are, I don't know, in Africa. in certain parts of Africa that are very, very poor ones. So this is the kind of realities we have, very distinct ones in the sense that we have poverty and wealth living together, and in our project as well. So what kind of challenges do we personally deal with? We have social, political, economic, cultural issues to address, but mostly the things that have come up since 2013 and since we began were questions of social exclusion. The kids we work with, they undergo all kinds of social exclusion, cultural exclusion. Even when it's for free, it's not part of what is accessible for them. So they have gender issues, they have class, race, we work with deaf kids. So, and even hearing issues that they have to deal with, how do they deal with these things? So we say that both teachers and educators, they are oppressed in the Freudian sense. We have a lot of students who work on the streets selling things, and others who are isolated from their families, and many of them who are drug dealers or drug users, and they all come to this. And last year, because of the blue whale and this game that people were cutting themselves and finally killing themselves, they also are, many of them are suicidal kids who are always talking about the depression they go through, both the rich and the poor ones. So these are some of the things we have in our reality. And I think it's not a local thing only, it's a historical result, and it's a global thing as well. So we agree with Sukio, a French writer, who talks about our actual reality as something where, as a place where competition of everyone against everyone is going on. That the individual profits are the focus of everybody and all the relationships. So we end up by having limited democracy. And Milton Santos, a Brazilian writer, says that in this way, what we have is a social abandonment and a perverse kind of globalization. So what do we mean by that? These are scenes created by some of the people in the all the way? Sometimes. So these are the kind of things that we address with the kids. So I'm showing this to you just so you know the kinds of issues that in Brazil are essential aspects of violence and sexual harassment and religious things against homosexual people and immigration issues. So these are the things that create the reality we live in, and that to a certain extent create for the kids a kind of context that we would say is very perverse in the sense that you can talk about. So we use this as the basis for all the choices we have in terms of what to teach and how to teach. So everything we teach departs from the context of this general reality there. So there are many. And what do we understand by globalization? Because people talk about globalization in different ways, and that's, for example, how people decide about what is going on in the world. We are under a coup, according to some people, and I'm one of them in Brazil. According to other people, we are living we have an impeachment, and now we are living in a new era. Not a good one anyway for anyone. But anyway, how are these things decided, and how are these things discussed internationally? How are the things that we have locally being suppressed by the international and big companies that I was going to say invade, but let's say that arrive in our country? And how is this country being transformed or destroyed because of this new wave of globalization that people talk about? And how's this interconnectedness that we get from globalization changing the way we are. So I would never be able to be here if not for this globalization thing. So we say that we can think about globalization as a complex of a lot of different processes, and it has always been there. The only difference now is the scope that it has taken, and the intensity and speed of how we get connected and ideas and information get traveled around. And Milton Santos, who is a geographer, he says that we can have a devastating impact from this, which will include people losing their specificities and their cultural desires and aims in order to accept and globalize in the sense of not global, but certain locals becoming the global. So it's not a question, we're not learning about Brazilian stuff or global, we are not globalizing for you or from Africa or from Asia. Normally what we get is European and North American ideas becoming global. So what do we mean by globalization? And in a perverse way, this will be the kinds of use we have. But in a nice and in a transformative way, he talks about a movement that deviates from only economic issues, but think about the way we can connect, and by getting connected, we can be transformative together. How can we be part of a big thing with other people around the world, using the good aspects of globalization in order to change? And that's what we are trying to do in our group, how we can find what Paulo Freire used to call the viable unheard of. Have you heard this expression here? No. Paulo Freire had this, what everybody knows is the pedagogy of the oppressed. Yeah, and then the idea that you banking education. But as a response to this, which is what damages education, he talked about the viable unheard. I think it's a very good way of thinking about what we do as educators, because the idea of being viable, being possible, being, something that is in our hands and we can try and make things happen through this. So you have limiting situations that are very hard, but how do you deal with that? How do you cope with that? You simply cope or you transform? And if you transform, then you think, oh, it's a big issue. How can I transform such a thing? It's so big. So the kids live in neighborhoods where drug dealers command everything. How can I change this? So it becomes a whole thing and a big thing. But what is viable for these kids to do? How do we analyze the issues we live through? And how do we find solutions that are possible and that were not thought of before, but which can be done, and although they are daring, they are not impossible. So Stanko talks about having the enactment of change in this thinking about future, because one of the things I learned as a researcher and an educator, talking to the kids mainly, is that many times the kids they don't dream. The worst situation I ever lived was with a 12-year-old boy. He was in a remedial class for Portuguese, his own language. And then we were talking, and I said, "What are your dreams?" And then he answered, "Can I dream?" And then I think it was horrible for me, because you can take everything from people, money, food, whatever, but dreaming is something that is, well, for free to a certain extent. But then we started studying Spinoza, and Spinoza said that unless you know something, you cannot dream about it. How can you dream about something you don't know? So you have to get to know things so you can get to desire them, wish for these things. And this idea became very essential for our group. So education for us is about creating possible desires, things that you can decide because you get to know things. So you get to know things, you get to think about them. People used to say, why does this boy want to be a traffic dealer? He could be a trying to be a doctor. If he studied hard, that's not easy. That's not how things are actually. But anyway, people say these stupid things. But why does he want to be a traffic dealer, the leader in the community, which is such a bad thing because they live for 20, they die when they are 25, 26, if they get there. Why does this kid, that's what they know. That's what they're used to. So that's what they want, because that's what they know. All the rest is outside their possibilities. And one thing I learned by working with the East Side Institute and the group that Carrie participates is that the kids need to learn how to live in different contexts, how to discover means of participating in different situations. In linguistics, it has a name. This has a name. It's mobility. The concept of mobility connects two different concepts together. One is of chronotype, Bakhtin's concept of time and space in one single thing. But chronotype is not only we are here at 12 o'clock in this room, but what does this room mean to you? And what does this room mean to me at this time? For me, it's a place where I'm exchanging ideas about my country, where I'm creating possibilities of organizing with you, of talking to you and listening from you. For you, it's a place where you come regularly for, that's what I imagine, for lectures or conversations where very important people may be here, where teachers have meetings, where I fought during a meeting with such and such person. So this place is infused with ideas, histories, feelings, and emotions. All this that we create from this turns this into what Bakhtin called the chronotype. That is a place with feelings and histories. How do we create circumstances where kids see places or live places as these chronotypes, where the things that happen there become resources to live in other places? Because certainly, or whatever you do here, create for you some kind of resource you can be using in other different places. Of course, by participating today here and the questions you ask and the way you participate with me, you create for me resources to participate in ARA on Sunday, because then I know the kind of people who will be there and how they are going to connect to me or not. So all these things, and linguistically, as a linguist, this is essential. There are kinds of ways of participating, of speaking, of connecting, of looking at people, of paying attention to the way they sit, the way they look at me, their hand movement, their eyes and everything that I am absorbing. And by doing so, I'm gathering multimodal resources that will help me participate in other situations. So mobility is this ability to address your repertoire of resources in order to act in new ones. But bearing in mind that certain things that I say when I'm talking to Carrie on the way here on the train will not be proper to be said here. I cannot tell you about the stories I told her about my family and so on. So this will not get what he calls a good status in this context, because not everything is proper everywhere. Even knowledge, there are things that we do at home. I have a sore throat or something, and then I'm like, oh, you just put lemon in whatever, and then you drink this. And well, if I am a doctor, I cannot say certain things that we do in our family, which are traditional things in our family, to my patient, because that's not the proper thing that people would expect. Actually, in Brazil, people do. But that's another story. What is proper and what is it that is not proper, not expected, not relevant, but you do because you want to break the rules of the play. So having mobility is not only having knowledge, and that for us is very, very important, because people think that if I teach a lot of things in terms of grammar, in terms of contents in different areas, people will be able to use this in their lives. But if I just teach the things, how are these going to become part of the way of acting? In order to do that, then we introduce in our classes the concept of performance and play. Because when we perform and play, when we are doing our activities, people are put into, real life-like situations in which they have to try to use knowledge in order to do things with that. Not simply learn about, learn how to use Excel and how to calculate things on Excel. But they are learning how, for example, to plan their weekend with their friends, going out with their friends during the weekend. And they have small budget, each one of them. How can they use Excel in order to plan, to go out and have money so everybody can participate? It's the same use of the Excel thing, but the fact that it's connected to something that is meaningful to them, that puts them in real life, it makes the whole difference. So developing mobility presupposes that whatever you use is going to have you acting with that. Not in a functional way, but in a creation of who you are and an integration in you of different knowledge and different ways of acting, different ways of feeling. Because if you pretend that the students are here pretending to be at a conference and they have to dress like that, they have to use PowerPoint or whatever like that, they will have a feeling and a sensation as if it was there. And that's what we try to do as well. We try to make them develop mobility in real life-like situations. Well, how do we do that? I think this is what we can talk more about. We come from a Vygotskian tradition. Carrie said that we belong to this Iskar group. And Vygotsky said that everything you do is socially constructed. So if it's socially constructed, it's socially constituted. You are socially constituted. Language is a means to do that in many instances. So how do we do that? In 2012, we were invited to join this group where that had Gunter Kress, as I was talking to you, who works with multimodality. We had people from Greece, from Russia, from India, all these people in Europe, in Brazil, in India and Greece. All these people were discussing how young people use media and how young people in very deprived circumstances use the media in order to overcome the situations they went through. In Brazil, just to give you an example, in Russia, they were discussing how people with special needs use media in order to deal with the difficulties of this thing that they have. In Greece, they were in the times of crisis, and they were studying how people use media to talk about the crisis they were going through. In India, there was the rape thing, there was massive rape, many cases happening, and nobody did anything because they didn't see this as an issue because it's media. So in that time, they started discussing a lot about this, and the social media was used for this discussion, and they were showing how young people use those things. And in Brazil, we decided we wanted to see how the kids saw social media and media in general as a means to transform education. And we called kids and young people to come to the university and to discuss this with us. What did we do? We put these people together from different schools, only for schools in very deprived areas, and they were supposed first to say what they thought about it, how schools could be improved by the use of media, And then they had to perform to show us how they saw it happen in school, how media could transform school. The funny thing was they had actually very traditional views of how media could be, I mean, this transformative thing. So they would say, one of them said like this, well, if the teacher is a terrible person, so they performed something like the teacher was teaching, she couldn't teach because the students were making a mess in the class, and then the teacher said, now you come and you teach, and the boy, oh, you want to learn? Okay. Okay, the discovery of Brazil was made in 100 and this and this and this and this. And, well, what's the difference between looking at this and on a cell phone and the teacher presenting this? Their idea of how to improve and to qualify education, although they knew a lot of material and they used it, they didn't see a connection between what they did in their everyday life and what could be done in the classroom. Of course, when is it that students reflect about the way they are taught? They just have to learn the contents and perform well. So we kept reflecting. At that time, we had a teacher education program in which not only coordinators or teacher educators were learning how to do teacher education, but other teachers. So we asked in the school, you were a math teacher, science, and language. We invited these people to join us in monthly meetings and discuss ways to transform the way of teaching in the different areas and how this group of teachers would go back to their schools and do teacher education with their colleagues. Not just pass the knowledge, but do teacher education. How were they going to be in charge of the teacher education in their own schools? And then I kept reflecting about why aren't students there? People said, but come on, students, they know nothing about pedagogical concepts or issues, but they know what life is in school. They may not know theoretically about these things, but they know how horrible it is many times. So we decided to invite the students to become teacher educators. And this is the project we created. So, DigiMed was the international project, and it has had 3 different phases so far. The first one had this international collaboration with support from Marie Curie, and after that we had a more local thing in Brazil with support from PUC and other agents. And this year we start a new phase for the project, and we are together now, linguists, education people, and now a group of architects from the Faculty of Architecture and Urbanism. They want to change the landscape of the city, and they believe that education can help you change reality. It's from there. So we are together in a very nice collaboration with these people from urbanism and architecture. What do we want? We want to develop mobility, students' mobility to transform their reality. So how can they do that? They have to participate in different projects to create a viable unheard of, which we are talking about. So we want to think about how they can go through what we call outstanding experiences, or what Vygotsky called przeżywanie. Przeżywanie is something that you go through. Whenever we are here together, that can be seen as an event. It can be dramatic, not for you, but for me, certainly. But it's a dramatic event in the sense that probably you have ideas that are completely opposed to mine. And by doing this, we are, even if you're not saying anything till now, you are, what's that she's saying? But what we are living here, not for me, I am getting things that depend on my past experiences and histories and feelings and everything. And you, from yours, this is a przeżywanie. How do we create something in the classroom that is so dramatic that each person is going to connect that to their previous experiences and create something new with that, something outstanding? That's why we call this is przeżywanie. And you're going to see what we do in order to create dramatic events that can be turned into tragedy. In these things, in these moments, we think that for people to survive those moments, they need to address, learn, use resources, different resources. So resources they have and resources we are going to be introducing to them. And by doing this, they will create a repertoire. When they do this, they will learn to act with these connections to transform their reality. And not the immediate one, but multiple ones, that they can go back to their schools and do things there. I'll give you an example. In one semester, some years ago, we worked with women, how women are treated in parties. So when you go to a party, or when you go to any party, teenagers party, young adults, how are women in Brazil, for example? If you go to one of these, it's not called disco anymore, but I don't remember. But if you go to one of these places in Brazil, women for free, they're paying. People thought, that's fantastic, we don't have to pay. It's wonderful. And all the ads for this are, wow, they show these beautiful women with a wonderful body, and the men all looking at them, but they are very, I mean, the dress code is typical. And then we show this to them. What is the meaning of being a woman in this ad? How are women being treated? And then we show them Pride and Prejudice. How are women treated in parties in those times? Then we went back to Shakespeare and Romeo and Juliet. How are women treated in parties? And then we came back to nowadays and we showed them videos of parties. And how are women treated in parties? You're just a thing that people buy, just like they're doing now. You buy the tickets because you want those women that go there for free. So what kind of, so how do you evaluate this? And then we work with genre analysis, how you deal with the language of ads. We work historically with women throughout history. We work with literature and all different things. And then from that time on, one of the schools created a feminist group in the school to deal with the issues that women, girls have there in the school. This had nothing to do with what we did. It had to do with what their reality demanded. So this is the type of thing that we do, but they have to learn, they have to study literature, they have to study history, they have to study language in order to realize how women are dealt with in our society. And by understanding, by knowing, they can desire a different reality and they can devise plans for that. This is one of the examples so far. I'm going to give others. So, well, who are the participants of this research group, this research intervention project? Everybody's considered a teacher educator in the group. Everybody who is there knows that they are not doing that for themselves. It's not something that we take the students and the students learn different ways of, no, the students learn how they can do teacher education in other contexts. So we have teachers, we have school coordinators, principals, researchers, project coordinators, and sign language interpreters as well, because we have deaf kids and hearing kids together. So we do need these. We have private and public schools, and in 2017, we have 9 schools involved. This is all volunteer work. The schools, they don't pay anything and they don't get paid either. Nobody gets any money from that. We get money for cameras, computers, but everybody comes once a month on a Saturday morning from 9 to 1, and we are there in this project. Afterwards, they expand the project in their own schools in the ways they see fit for their realities. What kind of activities do we do? We have weekly meetings with the researchers, monthly meetings to discuss theoretical aspects that are essential. We have monthly workshops, the one with the schools, de-encapsulating projects that the schools develop in their own schools. And then we have an annual presentation where Carrie has been at least 2 times to see, and they present like what we want them to be as researchers. So 8-year-old kid presenting a conference and so on and so forth.
Can you say what you mean by de-encapsulated?
Yes.
People,
Mhm.
it's not a word we.
No, this is an invention because we say that first of all, this started with you, the industry, by talking about content being encapsulated in school. So what you learn in mathematics is encapsulated in math classes. And what you learn in geography, here. They are not only encapsulated in the different subjects, but they are encapsulated in school. When you leave school, you don't know what relationship that have with your reality. So the first process of the encapsulation is leaving school and seeing the connection, or bringing the streets to the school and the school to the streets. Once I was visiting a school in Oxford, and this was an amazing answer I got. First, the principal said something like this. I tell my students, they have to forget reality. When the door of this school closes, reality is outside. Now we are in school. We don't care about reality. We care about what we are doing here. I was shocked. Then we were in this fantastic Romeo and Juliet class, and the kids were reciting poems and discussing Romeo and Juliet. And then I said, oh, how nice, how are you using this in your dates? My dates? It has nothing to do with this. This is Romeo and Juliet. So, okay. This is the process of encapsulation I'm talking about. How can you learn about Romeo and Juliet and not connect to your datings? So what we mean by de-encapsulation? Connecting these things. But also we are encapsulated as a researcher. I am encapsulated in my role as the coordinator of my research group. So I don't know what happens in the realities of the schools. I don't know how to talk to kids very well. I never think that I can learn from a kid about how to teach. So we de-encapsulate also who we are and the positions we have. So maybe in the first semester of the project, we researchers prepare things to do with the schools, with all participants. We are all participants. There is no difference if you are a teacher or a student or a principal. Here, you are one of us. So in the first semester, we do things with them. In the second semester, each school comes and does things with everybody else. So they plan activities to be done, and you will see what kind of activities these are. So if you have anything you want to know in the middle, it's nice because I always like conversation, but I'm worried because of the time. So you can ask. Some of the concepts we've been working with the kids we work a lot with multiliteracies, the New London Group concept of multiliteracies. So we started with multiculturality, this idea that when you teach, you cannot teach from one perspective only. Whatever it is you're talking about, you have to show different possibilities of understanding, both those that are accepted as scientific and those that are considered more everyday, because they all together create more understanding about the social thing or something that you're doing. Using multiple media can be helpful because you can address in different ways and see things also with more diversity. And mainly, we want the kids to understand that meanings are created not only by verbal communication, but by different modes. The way you move your hands, and I move my hands a lot, the way you look, the way you sit, the way you dress, the way you participate in different ways. So we do that. Then we work also with multiliteracy, the concept that there are actions that you go through. You have to depart from a situated practice when you are presenting contents, something that has connection to students' life. Then you move to overt instruction, where the possibility of connecting contents to real life can come. A critical framing, understanding that from a critical perspective, and then moving to how can I change what I do in my life because I learned all this. and I reflected out all this. Finally, in 2015, we started thinking, how do I think about social activities I have in my life, and I bring those to organize the curriculum of the school. Instead of organizing language by the verb to be, the simple present, I will start by going to a party, occupying the city, visiting museums, whatever, things that we do in real life, and then all the contents will come up. And how do I do this? Through play. And in the conversations we have while playing and after playing, how do we use argumentation? How do we teach students to participate in discussions that are very difficult and that are necessary in schools by dealing with argumentation? And finally, how do we create viable heard projects for ourselves in our personal lives and in our social situations? In order to do that, we've been dealing with different themes. They have to do with what we are living in the country. For example, 2013, we had a lot of demonstrations in the city because of a bus fare that was got a raise, and it was a horrible thing. So we worked with demonstration. Last year, we had terrible fights between leftists and rightists. The parties were, and people became, well, the country is in a mess now. So we decided to work with the concept from a photographer who said, we other. It's we otherness, how we connect to the others, and we see ourselves as different, but as one. That's a very important concept for us, because we are individually different, but collectively we are part of a whole. And how can we see this? And this can be something that we can live with. This year, life is even worse country-wise. So we are talking about how to resist and expand, how we can resist the horrible things we are going through this year in political terms, in economical terms, but how can we go on and at the same time expand in the shared landscapes that we have. So all the time we have things like this, and then we choose the social activities in which these are going to happen. So going to parties, moving around the city, making and keeping friends. This was about kids sending nudes, and they were doing that. So how do we teach them about this? And we discussed about public and private. And how do you make friends? What is proper and not proper when you're according to the social reality you are in? And how do we teach content in this from this perspective? Well, I chose the two examples from last year. Last year was the otherness. This is a picture by Bob Wolferson. He's the official photographer of Gisele Bündchen. You probably heard about her, but he's also a very important photographer of social realities. And this is a photo here in New York. I think it's Long Island, I'm not sure, but in the idea that you put together people that are really different and individually, but when you look at them together, they create an ensemble. And that's what we want to create. We are different. We're definitely different, but how do we create an ensemble? In a sense, what we did was we used our reality in 2017. We had our carnival, you know, about this. And there was a carnival at a square, Roosevelt Square in São Paulo. And people who lived there were mad because it was loud, it was messy. And people who were parading, they were very happy. And but the people who lived there called the police, and the police destroyed the carnival for everyone. And some people thought that, no, the police was right. No, the neighbors were happy. No, the people who were parading, partying. We brought this as an issue to discuss geographical characteristics of the place, the loss of silence in Brazil, and many different things as a means for them to discuss and grab knowledge, not to debate, because that's not our aim. Not because in debate one has to win. No, we wanted them to construct and deliberate about 2018 and what would we do in order to take care of all the parties involved. So that's what they did, and they were learning about the geography of São Paulo and the different zones and what you can and can do. This was the one I talked about, hanging out with friends. So how this is a good picture for you to have the configuration of the class. That's how we meet, 100 people in a big room, and then we separate in small groups, then go back to the big room. So we are always dealing with differences. So this is a nice picture of people walking here. We have like the pizza you have here, we have it there available for people to eat from 9 to 1. And it's a collaborative thing. Everybody brings something and then they play around, and they were deciding, they had budgets, but it was like a role play card. Each person got one, and they had that amount of money, that means of transportation, and we had to calculate how they were going to get out together and where they were going, how they would go there, and how much money they would need, and how much time they would have to move around the city. And they had to present all this in this calculating thing in the Excel. Don't ask me much about this thing, because I don't know personally about this, but they know much better than I do. What I'm going to talk to you about is about the playing blue whale. I don't know, does anyone here know about the blue whale? No. Well, actually, it was an issue here in the country too. It was an international issue about a game that was created, they say it was created in Russia, but I'm not sure. Nobody knows. But this game had a lot of rules, and kids had to draw things on the arms, I mean, cutting themselves. And the last, they had a lot of challenges.
Not draw, cut.
Cut, yeah, not draw. Yeah, draw, but cutting. They had a lot of different rules, and the last one, the challenge, was kill yourself. All of them were dangerous things. And we had in our group 5 kids involved in this game. And in some of the schools, 13 kids, and other schools, 10, 2 kids. So people were really involved, and it was an international game, and people got really crazy about this. So with victims in all over the world, there were people killing themselves. So these are the rules in English. So for example, draw a whale on a sheet of paper, send a photo to the curator. This was a nice one, but then wake up at 4:20 a.m. and go to the rails. Visit any railroad that you can find. Don't talk to anyone all day. Make a vow that you are a whale. So they had all these crazy things, and kids really did it. They were following this. So these are the kinds of things they did. And also in the UK, what's the Blue Whale Suicide Challenge? How many deaths has the game linked to? So, and these are us, the kids discussing about this, because we have a WhatsApp group with more than 100 people, teachers, kids, and they started talking about this because this became a thing in Brazil. And they kept saying things, what they thought. Then we decided to create a game. It was not a blue whale, but it was a blue whale-like thing, but about nice things. So the rules we created were, we created some groups, and then draw a dollar sign in your hand. Send a picture of them. Well, carry your friends' belongings throughout the game. Nice things. Look at the last one. Put your wallet, money, and any valuables in a basket in front of the room. We never thought that adults, because remember, not just the kids, everybody. We never thought that people would put their valuables in a box. That's how we played. People sent them. See, they draw things. And this is what people did. They really did. They all put their money, their things, in this basket in front of the class, kids and adults. And then we asked them, now you did it. And I was desperate because I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with all this thing here? Because somebody could pick from somebody else. We never expected that. We thought people would pick that. Oh, they're connecting with Blue Whale, so we can't do this. No. And then they had to draw. And there was a question. what kind of agency did you have? This is the social activity thing from Yuri Engstrom, for those who know. These are the kids' things. They did it. And they had to say what the object was, what the instruments were, everything. And then they had to say, was it an active or a passive subject that you were when you were playing? Then they realized, we were very passive. We followed the rules without thinking. And then we initiated a discussion. So there you have situated practice, overt instruction with this. Then we had a critical framing because they had to discuss what they were doing. And finally, they had to do, how can we survive games such as the blue whale and others that happened? Because then people came up with different games such as these or other things that happen in the country like that.
Now you have 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Which includes conversation, right?
So I'm going to go fast. This is about, this one will be very fast because I prefer that you see the video with the kids talking about and the participants. I will just go fast. This is about a crackland, a place in São Paulo where crack dealers and users live. And the mayor decided he was going to deoccupy this place. And he got the police, and the police went there and very violently took the people from this place. And the TV, widespread, all these ideas and everything that had gone on with different positions from different reporters. And the mayor giving his opinion, the governor, social workers, the neighbors, both the people who deal with the crack there and people who live nearby. And we took this for the kids to discuss. We created an inquiry discussion in which they were supposed to, in small groups, talk about what crackland was, well, how it was formed, what kind of problems were there, how we could reorganize it. And they had this discussion for some time as a group. And finally, they were asked to perform something that would say how they would solve this problem, what kind of things could be done in this situation. Because the point was, everybody was fighting everybody. Because if you thought that crackland should disappear, you would not accept to listen to those who thought that a different kind of work, a non-violent work, should be done there. And what we tried to create with them was a listening activity in which they would understand the situation from different perspectives so they could create a new one, different from the initial one they had. And then they would devise something that could be done in that place, and they had to perform that. By doing this, they worked in a transformative practice. They played with possible realities. So I'll be fast so you can ask questions. I will show you what the kids say and what the people say about it. Let's see if I will. Yeah?
Try it.
Yeah, it's no.
This make us development our critical thinking, and also it makes us join the theory and the practice.
This is Matt. I have voice, and I can say what I think about current affairs.
E o projeto mudou muito assim na minha vida, porque tanto acadêmica quanto pessoal. Tinha muita vergonha. E hoje em dia eu não tenho mais essa vergonha para apresentar para o público e tal. And it's really important for me because it makes me feel a new person. I can express myself in this project, which is a very, very, very nice thing.
O Direito Médio é um projeto muito importante para mim, porque foi através dele que eu comecei a desenvolver meu senso crítico e minha argumentação. Você tem outros métodos for reaching markets, intention experience, and we can know different people in different ways.
O grupo de gente manejar propostas para o aluno conhecer o professor e o professor conhecer o aluno.
It's an innovative project. The context of the project was organized by diversity, in which all participants perform different roles. And my experience with DigitalEd has changed the way I have been working with the teachers and collaborating with students at the school.
For today on DigitalEd, my experience is very rich because we can exchange ideas and culture, learning.
I have learned that how to work together and how to make this kind of work make the difference in the classrooms.
DigitalEd becomes possible university, elementary, and high school work together to improve our world.
Eu me sinto participando desse programa. Eu me sinto feliz, eu me sinto livre. Eu sinto que nós podemos melhorar a nossa sociedade para melhor. E nós vamos conseguir.
O projeto DigitalEd foi muito importante na minha vida por conta que, com ele, eu pude compreender que pode ter mudanças nas escolas.
O projeto é muito importante para mim, pois nele eu tive espaço para debater, aprender, conversar e fazer a diferença.
And I'm always other thing that I find very interesting is the fact that we always have the chance to interact upon this theoretical framework that goes beyond our actions.
De média muito legal. A gente tinha voz, a gente podia conversar mais e ver o professor como um amigo.
Estou 5 meses, há mais 5 meses no Média, conversando lá e estou falando tudo que eu penso. E está sendo muito importante por isso para mim.
How to work in DigitalEd, how to work together with children and teenagers towards a transformative and critical collaborative education.
A possibilidade de, naquele projeto, a pessoa ser sujeito do mundo, poderem exercer toda a sua subjetividade.
And the most incredible thing is that when we are all together, we can create unimaginable situations and things.
We all are intentionally together to be able to make a difference in our country.
O marcas do projeto é o cenário que ele cria para que mais exposições e diferentes agentes do contexto escolar possam pensar coletivamente.
As a researcher, I like the fact of all the projects are results of many reflections and different ideas with a group with different people.
Para mim, o DigitalEd é uma forma também de nós compartilharmos as nossas experiências com outras pessoas para nós incentivá-las a mudar o nosso mundo. Viva DigitalEd!
Okay, so, all right. So the idea, this is just to have a picture of the project. I will open for you to ask questions and see whatever you want. And hope I could present a little bit about our reality and our theoretical background. Thank you. Okay, any comments, questions? Yes,
thanks, it was really interesting. Probably didn't mean to think in a lot of different directions, so thank you. I have a question about the research that you're doing on the project. What are the kinds of research questions you're asking?
We have different people doing different kinds of research within the project because this is a place where we create our extramural. In our university, we have 3 different areas: teaching, researching, and doing connections with the community. So this is the place where we do the connection and we research about this. So my research personally is about how we construct a de-encapsulated mobility for the people there. So I analyze the language they use, how they participate. So I have very detailed analysis of their discourse. I use argumentation in order to do that. I have another student who works on how interpreters create a connection between deaf and hearing people in the project. Another one is to study about the different activities, the tasks that are created both by the researchers and the schools, how they deal with these multiliteracy ideas that are there. There's another one work with the concept of collaboration in the groups, how collaboration happens at the university level and then at school level, and what kind of impact it has in the community they have. Let me see. Cecilia is working also with collaboration, but she's analyzing the kind of collaboration that happens and how it's connected with theory and practice, how theory and practice are infused in the kinds of discussions that students and teachers have together, how students use theory to talk about things and so on.
I think one of, having been to visit this, one of the most interesting and very different than what we usually see here. So you've got a room with professors, graduate students, teachers, coordinators, children. The way faculty students here might get together and discuss theory is done in that room with everybody. It's not like that's done later. It's like those conversations are infused into the dialogue. So you've got 12-year-olds who now learn to participate.
No, this class was not very multimodal. We have to use more multimodal. No, I don't think multiculturality was an issue in this group. So we need to increase the number of possibilities to understand these are kids saying in this conversation.
Webinar.
Wow.
This is actually one of our PhD students who's Brazilian. She's there now. So she says, we've been dealing with a lot of resistance in Brazil to the politically engaged academia, as public universities are seen as some sort of ideological or leftist enclave. How is that affecting your project? How do you deal with that?
Well, it always affects because of money matters. But apart from that, PUC is a very progressive new institution. The priests are not. The priests are horrible. The priests that are there now are, yes, I'm saying, because PUC, during the military coup, PUC, the Archbishop of São Paulo was a very progressive one, and he helped the country see a different way of dealing with universities. So our dean there, the rector of the university, was elected directly. So the teachers, the students, and the workers in the university, they elected the dean. And nowadays, this is not an issue anymore. But still, we are considered a very progressive university. So we are allowed to do these kinds of projects that sometimes public institutions can't. We have space. They don't give money. Money, no. But if we want to do for free, it's okay. It doesn't matter what we talk about. But I was hired last year by the city government to create a curriculum for a certain area in the city, reorganization of the curriculum for the different subject areas. And I got these people from DigitNet to work with me in this project. So kids and people were going crazy. How can we do a project to change the political system and in the sense of how the policies that were engaging people? But we were too political. And now we have this issue in São Paulo, in Brazil, which is schools without parties. Sounds beautiful, but that's a way of saying you cannot talk about facts, you cannot talk about the communism, you cannot talk about anything that has religion, or mostly you can talk about religion. And this idea is very difficult for us to deal with when we are in this project, because that's exactly what we're doing. So far, we haven't suffered anything, but I left the project in the city because there was a how do you say that? I took the deputy in the city.
Like the deputy mayor.
Yeah.
Assistant mayor.
Yeah, so, and he's that, and because he was visiting the schools and say, this cannot go, this is too political. And then I said, well, how is he going to address my proposal of a new curriculum? Because we used, for the first class, we taught kids were supposed to discuss about different kinds of relationships in English. So they would see people invited to go out, two boys, then Afro-American and a white girl, and a person with some kind of, well, all kinds of relationships, all kinds of partnerships possible we had it there. And for this view of school without parties, this is not proper. Talking about different types of family, like in the code we were reading, not possible anymore. So I decided to quit because I thought this is not the moment where we can do these things officially. And it could harm the work we are doing as researchers with the schools, because this is parallel. People don't know very well what they're doing. They know the results because the kids keep complaining about things and creating things, but still not the same. Yes, please.
From your perspective as a linguist and multilingual, we've heard a lot of different languages spoken, and so how does it play out, this multilingual? Is it in the research, but also in the discussions and in the conversation?
Well, as linguists, for us, this is the main thing. And it's not only a question of the language, but like Portuguese. Even within Portuguese, there are people speaking different Portuguese. Because they are with people who speak in a way that is considered not so prestigious, together with people who speak prestigious Portuguese, and then sign language, and some can speak English, some can't. So this creates an opportunity for them to create a repertoire to talk. So there is a boy there. You can talk about the triangle, Yuri's triangle, better than many of my doctoral students. But he speaks like, she go to the, well, with no agreement, with lots of issues in terms of Portuguese, which granted him with the title of a very bad student. With they used to call him garbage student, meaning that he's good for nothing. But there, he has a position, and this position he acquired there because he can talk about this. He can do teacher education wonderfully. He teaches the English teachers how to teach him the English he doesn't know. So this guy changed it, and the way he's viewed by the school changed as well. So this is the kind of transformation in linguistic terms that we see when we analyze. Another thing, deaf and hearing people thought they could not connect unless there was an interpreter. So we create situations like this. Now you two are going to talk. Survive. We don't care. Just do it. And they have to find ways. And it's beautiful how people use what we call here, based on what Ophelia Garcia has been working with, translanguaging. I have a text in which I studied the actions of translanguaging in the project. In many instances, and it's beautiful to see how people learn to translanguage and how this is a result of developing repertoire in different aspects, but mainly in the effective one, which is shown in their testimonies.
Yes, I can really.
I know. You don't get to stop.
I can really see the connection is very interesting. Yes, the connection with my son.
Yeah.
And also the connection with Freire.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would be very proud of that.
Well, actually, I work with the person in charge of his, I don't know how you say that. It's a group that studies Freire in the university, but there is a name in it. It's cátedra. I don't know if you have this word here. It's when there is cátedra, Paulo Freire, cátedra, Foucault. It's internationally when you have the study of an individual researcher. And but your university, for you to have this, you have to have a very special group, very specialized in that author, so you can get that. And we are part of this group in James' group there. So you're right. We try.
Thank you very much.